All right. So I've noticed that people have some difficulties with math on their computers, right? So the digital interactivity and digital interfacing with math on their computers is something that people often struggle with. So I want to kind of go through some practical tips and some ideas. The first thing I want to mention is that LaTeX is the way that we communicate between tools, right? Between systems that need to read or output math. We want it to always be in LaTeX, but we don't want to write LaTeX, right? Because it's 2026 and syntax is dead, right? We don't want to be learning any syntax, but it is important to remember though, that we need a way to convert it into LaTeX so that other tools can use it. So that also means that other systems that require you learning syntax, those have to go as well, right? I also know that there are popular tools like Photomath or these apps where you take a picture of your handwritten math or like an equation or something, and it will go through that and it will solve it for you, right? So these are tricky because you can't steer them to solve a problem in the way that you want it to, right? Or the way that you're required to, maybe. You can't just copy or learn the particular solving style that a particular symbolic solver would do for you. So it's kind of a waste of time and it's not really what you want to be doing, right? And you can't ask any follow-up questions, right? The first thing we have to realize is that we're going to be encountering a lot of math on our computer that is not going to have some easily accessible way to get that math into a representational format that we can then do something with, right? There are often going to be these sort of awkwardly rendered things in PDFs that the formulas look good, but we can't actually copy it, right? If you select the equation, you press Control C, that doesn't serialize into anything that we can do anything with. In general, what we want to be doing is we want to be using a neural network based optical character recognizer, right? And the popular one is MathPix. Now you have the equation in LaTeX. What we do now is we paste that into ChatGPT and we have ChatGPT solve it. So this is our replacement for Wolfram Alpha, right? All of these symbolic AI tools that exist for solving math, we're no longer using them. We're using ChatGPT. So a common question here and something that a lot of people sort of just naturally respond with is this typical critique of ChatGPT, which is that it is ontologically probabilistic, right? So how can you ever rely or know that the way that it answers your question is correct? This is a very outdated critique because LLMs have access to tools. ChatGPT and Gemini, right? You can do all of this in Gemini if you want to as well, have access to a Python environment. So on the back end, what we want ChatGPT to be using is SymPy. And this library is going to give you as much functionality as any other thing you will find, any other paid service you will find. And what's great about it is that ChatGPT has perfect knowledge of it, right? So it can just create the code, it can execute the code, right? It can write the code, it can execute the code, and it can deterministically and verifiably be able to do whatever you want it to do. And you can ensure that the response that it gives you is deterministic. And there's another point about that as well, which is that I don't want to oversell this idea that you have to verify everything with SymPy because it will really, really seldom make a mistake. It's a bit of a controversial point, but I'm going to be sticking with that one for this video. So then what do we do, right? So we get a response from ChatGPT. What do we do with it now? This is a pretty big problem because once you get a response, you often want to do something with that. And you'll notice, and a lot of you are aware of this fact that if you again try to copy the math, by just selecting it and then pressing Control C, again, it does not serialize to anything valid, right? It's not something you can paste in anywhere. So generally when I talk to people, what they will say is that they might click the copy icon at the bottom and they will copy the entire message. That's going to include a lot of other things, but then if you maybe paste that in somewhere else, you can sort of look through that markdown serialized text that you got and you can find the equation. You know, the other thing that people do is they will write a new message to ChatGPT in the same chat and asking it to produce the LaTeX, right? So I was talking about neural network-based optical character recognizers before, right? I mentioned MathPix particularly, and you can use that here as well. But I want to just point out that generally, if you run into math on web pages like ChatGPT, the way that the math has rendered is typically through KaTeX, right? KaTeX, or MathJax. And in a lot of those instances, you can actually find the source, the LaTeX source that generated that in the source code on that page. So it's there. It's just kind of difficult to get at, right? You have to open up, you have to inspect the elements basically and find that source code. But there are a lot of plugins that can do this for you. So I have one called Vieta Space Math Tools, which you can use. That one works for Firefox and Chrome. I also want to note that there are others as well, right? It's not that hard to find these, and they're not that hard to make. So there are quite a few of them. And if you're using Safari, for example, you can just find one there as well. It's not too difficult. And this is really nice because like they will often just, or at least the one that I have is you can just click it, and it will copy to your clipboard, and then you can do whatever you want with that, right? So how do we actually write math, and how do we actually edit math? What we need is a what you see is what you get type of math editor. And you can go and look for these, right? But I am just going to mention mine, right? For obvious reasons, I'm going to mention Vieta Space Notes. You can just paste the LaTeX into Vieta Space Notes along with other text and along with other equations. And any LaTeX you paste in, you're going to be able to edit visually. I made this critique to these sort of photo-based apps that let you take pictures with your phone that then is piped into some kind of symbolic solver because of the lack of guidance and the lack of constraints that you can give it on how to solve a problem. So now let me actually explain how ChatGPT can be used to provide that functionality. You should be pasting in your guidelines, your starting set, your background, kind of all that information that you want it to follow in your initial message. So the way that kind of it works is that you will have your sort of context layer where you provide all this information. Then you have your actual input layer, which is the actual problem that you want to solve or kind of need help figuring out or thinking about. So in order to do this, you're going to need your formula sheet or your constraint document to be in a text format, right? And it's probably going to typically be a PDF. So it's going to require some post-processing there to turn it into a text. We can use MathPix here, but if it is a PDF, typically the easier way is to use ChatGPT. My other recommendation is that I do not think you should ever write anything important in the ChatGPT input field or whatever chatbot you're using, because they don't expect any advanced input. And also, like, it's so easy to erase everything. It is so finicky, and like math is just going to be so difficult, right? It's such a small window as well, right? The element itself is so small. I would always recommend that you write whatever it is that you want to write in another document editing tool, right? And then you just kind of compose everything there, and then you copy that into ChatGPT. And then you just send it off. So that can be in anything you want, right? Any kind of note-taking app or like text editor that you feel comfortable with. So here on the left-hand side, you can see an example, right? So it starts off with the sort of background, which is the formula sheet for the exam. And then it's been truncated for the purposes of fitting on screen here, right? So it ends with the ellipsis. And then we have the problem, and then we have sort of the post-amble, right, at the end there. And then on the right-hand side, we have Vieta Space Notes, right? I want to recommend that again. because then you can actually edit your equations visually, right? And it's kind of more concise and it's easier to sort of glance at and read. And then you can just copy that, over into ChatGPT as well, right? So this is going to be the end of this video. I don't know how clear I was on every point, so I'll make follow-up videos and answer any of your questions in the comments.